Thanks for joining us today. We're in the last section of the first half of 1 Corinthians 15. You say, well, that's a very complicated way of putting it. Well, we're going to get to the end of this first half, which is all about the fact of resurrection. And it's been a tremendous study in my heart. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have as well. And we're really in this final bit that is really teaching us that resurrection affects what we believe, or what we believe affects how we behave. Let me read it with you. 1 Corinthians 15 and verse number 33 and 34. Be not deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners. Awake to righteousness and sin not, for some have not the knowledge of God. But I speak this to your shame. Just God will bless his word to us. We're thinking about the symbolism of baptism being fulfilled or being relevant because of resurrection. We're thinking about risking life in verses 30 to 32. And here we come to kind of almost the climax, the advice as to resurrection and the truth of resurrection. You've got to be careful what you believe, because it will affect how you live. So he deals with a general principle in verse number 33. Be not deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners. The ESV says bad company ruins good morals. Some translations say evil doctrine corrupts good behaviour. You see the idea? What you believe affects how you behave. I think, if I remember rightly, I wrote this down a while ago, that Paul is quoting a man called Menander when he says bad company corrupts good character. I think that's the NIV translation. They reckon this came from another writer. And it's just, he's picking up a well-known proverbial statement. I think the full statement is this: he who labours diligently need never despair, for all things are accomplished by diligent and labour. Really, the idea is that what you believe affects how you behave. And this expression, apparently in Greek, has been picked up and it's been translated into Latin, and there are different ideas that have come out of this. The die has been cast, apparently, has come out of this expression as well. It's famously quoted by Julius Caesar upon committing his army to civil war by crossing the river Rubicon, and he used this expression, the die is cast. What he believed affected what he did. That this is true in our lives as believers. It is impossible to associate with false teaching or false evil people without being corrupted by them. So Paul is actually getting to the crux of the matter here. And he's saying the people that you are having company with, the people who are teaching you, are affecting what you believe. They're affecting how you then behave, how you live. I think it's William MacDonald in his commentary that says this: evil doctrine inevitably has an effect on one's life. False teachings do not lead to holiness. Now, you only need to look into some other passages of Scripture to get a really good example of this. So I'm just kind of turning over rather rapidly here to what Peter wrote, 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 2, and he writes this. He's talking about false teachers, false prophets, then false teachers. He says, many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. So they're denying the Lord. They're bringing in damnable heresy. The result is swift destruction, but the consequence of the company they're keeping, the people who listen to them, the people who follow their teaching, is that people follow their pernicious ways. It's not just their teaching. So we need to be very careful with what we teach, because people will not just follow what we teach, they'll follow how we live. And many will follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. People have a big influence. Acts chapter 20 talks about men rising up amongst God's people, as well as men coming into amongst God's people. And it talks about people who lead people. People follow them. So we mustn't really follow men. It's great to have men we admire. It's great to have men we respect. It's great to trust men. But we must remember, ultimately, their gift, their ability, and the truth they present is God's. And we trust and follow the living God. The lifestyle of people that we have to imitate are those whose objective in life, the end of their life, is Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. Jude talks about the same type of thing in Jude chapter 1, and he says, certain men crept in unawares, and then he says they turned the grace of our God into lasciviousness. In other words, they manipulated the truth, and bad doctrine produced bad behaviour. And so we get this in the world today when you get false teaching about sexual things, about liberty, about freedom to do certain things, and all on the basis of love and goodness and grace, and you're ushered into something that is sinful. Listen to verse 34. Awake to righteousness and sin not. Awake to righteous truth. Awake to righteous living that comes from that truth. Awake to righteousness and sin not. And there's a very dogmatic statement there. It's a very demanding statement. You see, he's saying, some have not the knowledge of God, for I speak this to your shame. There are men who don't actually, it's not they don't know facts, they don't know God. There were unsaved in the church in Corinth. There might be unsaved amongst us. We need to be very careful about this. I'm not throwing out accusations, but if it was true then, it must be possible to be true now. So he's saying, some have not the knowledge of God. So we have to awake to righteousness. The Christian is to be alert. The Christian has to be a person who is switched on and focused and concerned. To remember that sin has a dramatic effect upon the believer, both physically, emotionally, mentally, but also in the church, the effect that it has. And there are various passages that would teach us we've to be kept separated from the sins of the world, 2 Corinthians 6, and the darkness from the light. And we've not to have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, Ephesians 5. We've not to corrupt the temple of God. That's both your body in some passages, and it's the church of God when it comes to, well, 1 Corinthians 3 is the church, isn't it? 1 Corinthians 6 is your body. We've to awake to righteousness and sin not. 1 Thessalonians 5 teaches us it's time to wake up and to clean up. And Romans 13 teaches it's high time to awake out of sleep. We need to be people that are in tune and focused and understanding the times and aware of the truth and living for the glory of God. And we move to the next section. We're going to dip into, or maybe dip is the wrong word, we're going to dig into more details about not just the fact of resurrection, but the form of resurrection. We're going to see various objections that are raised. We're going to see how they're dealt with. But just remember that whatever you believe will affect how you live. Remember that Christ's resurrection is the first fruits of all other resurrections. Remember, Christ is raised from the dead. And there are many others that are going to be raised in their own order. And he will bring everything to its conclusion. And remember, what you believe about this will affect how you live, your attitude to life, your attitude to morality, your attitude to God himself. May God bless you again through his word today.